Welcome to the Lorecast, where we look into the lore and the stories by which we live. I'm Dr. Craig Chalquist, and you can find us at chalquist.com/podcast and at a number of other online venues. There is a new kind of leadership organization that's being set up out in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And I've had the good fortune of being asked to be involved with some of the design, including a summit coming up in September 2023. And the title of that summit is Igniting Next Level Leadership. If ever we lived in a time, we human beings, where leadership needed to be reimagined, this is it. Wow. If you read the news even once a week, and you pay attention to the kind of leadership that we're all stuck with, you understand. Just in the academic world, as a microcosm perhaps of what's happening elsewhere, I can't tell you how many schools I've worked for where information that's very basic that we all need to operate, faculty, administrators, staff, whatever, is hoarded by the higher-ups who run the school. Basic access systems are broken, or they live in the last century, or whatever their problem is. Really basic failures and gaps, and meanwhile higher-ups who seem completely unaware of the real state of the university and talking up an idealistic picture, perhaps meaning it, perhaps not, but just a complete disconnect between the ones who are overseeing everything and those of us who have to somehow try to make it work. I might do a podcast on there's all these announcements now, the death of higher ed or the problems in higher ed or whatever. And higher ed is being attacked, especially on the right politically. But some of this is self-inflicted. I see it all the time. So in any case, we definitely need some alternatives to our current models of leadership. And I'm thinking in particular of what Betsy Myers talks about in her book, Take the Lead. She refers to what she calls the command and control form of leadership. It's top-down leadership. I always think patriarchy when I see it in operation, whether it's men or women who are doing the leading. And it's the go it alone, I'm the heroic leader, you do what I say, that kind of model, right? The leader is the problem solver, the ones who make the big calls, all of that. And of course, keeps the crucial information hidden. Now, not all leaders do this, and we have many collaborative models of leadership as well. We have holistic leadership and even studies on the spirituality involved in leadership, good leadership. But we continue to see studies conducted by, I'm thinking, Forbes, the Wall Street Journal, and a number of other similar organizations that year after year say, at least in the United States, that the number one reason people leave their jobs is bad leadership. Not pay, not moving, none of that. Bad leadership. So I'm really happy not only that the new Teton Leadership Center, but also other organizations as well are reimagining and practicing new models of leadership. It's something I'm increasingly drawn to. And of course, I have a long history of a number of leader roles, administrative at the executive level and department chair and other things. And I now do corporate consulting as well on this topic. What I've noticed over the years is, and we're going to focus on this in this podcast, there's a missing ingredient. Many good models, many good practices, but there's something in particular that I think we need during chaotic, highly polarized times such as those we're living in. And that's the kind of leadership I want to talk about. And I call it the Enchanted Leader. By way of illustration of the Enchanted Leader, and to get into this discussion about this missing leadership ingredient, I want to tell you a brief version of a story from ancient Chinese mythology. And it involves Huangdi, the Yellow Emperor. And in the old stories of China, there's not this kind of Western question that we always ask, did such a person really live? And because in the West, we tend to be very literal-minded compared to other cultures. And so in places like China, at least as it was in the past, the question doesn't really arise. Huang Di may have been what we would call a mythical figure. He may have been a historical figure, and he may have been both. It doesn't matter for the purposes of this story. Huang Di is credited with a lot of achievements. So he's one of those mythological or folkloric figures who is sort of a patron of civilization itself. So he brought, for instance, navigation. He invented Chinese medicine. His wife invented the process by which silk is extracted from the silkworm, and so on. So in China, he's well known. So in this story, Huang Di builds a kingdom that is almost ideal, and everybody's happy. But Huang Di decides that what he wants to build is the ideal kingdom. So he looks for wisdom on the topic of how to govern, how to lead. And he spends a lot of time talking to wise people. He travels a lot to talk to them. He goes all over the world searching for the wisdom of leadership. And he doesn't find the exact set of instructions that he's looking for in terms of leading his people into the ideal kingdom. So he comes home. And shortly after he comes home, he falls asleep and he has a dream. And the dream is the blueprint for the ideal kingdom. So he wakes up the next day and he summons his ministers into a meeting and he says, "Wow, I've been all over the world looking for this wisdom, and here it is showing up right in my own dreams." And they get busy and they all build together the ideal kingdom. So leading from dreams and being able to inspire other people, in this case the ministers, with your dreams. And I'm using dream now not in the literal sense of a night dream, although they can take that form, but what is it that we as leaders dream about? How do we dream things forward? What are our dreams about how things should be? And that's the missing ingredient. So when I think about, for instance, the political and financial discourse in my country, what I don't hear are images of how good things could be, images of the kind of world we could help build together. I hear appeals to fear in almost every political message that goes out of any party. It's all about preventing harm. We have to act now to prevent this and to prevent that and all that. Nothing about how things could look when they're working and when we're all working together. So when I say the enchanted leader, I'm talking about somebody who is not only in touch with their own longings for things to be better, for how things could be, but in support of other people's visions of how things could be. And it's not as though this were some alien quality we need to find on another planet. It actually happens quite a bit. I think we can all think of mentors and leaders who saw the best in us and saw where we needed to go and were able to speak to that. And that's the thing about this kind of leadership. It articulates our better possibilities. It articulates how we can move forward and what we might create together. I remember as a young man unhappy in the world of insurance. I was hired as a tech writer right out of college, and it made me miserable. And fortunately, I had some good, wise, older people in my life who noticed this and who asked me, "What do you want to do? What is it that you really want to study? What would you enjoy doing?" And I said, "Counseling people." And then later, after I had gone through therapy training and spent a number of years doing therapy with people, the question came up again. And I had wise elder friends, and they said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Teach." And I made that happen. So it's a small example, but an important one, I think, because we all have these kinds of longings. And the enchanted leader allows us to not only become aware of these longings, which are sometimes repressed into unconsciousness, but encourages us to find ways to bring them into reality. When people work for me, I try to get some sense not only of what they most desire, but how they could show up and how whatever organization I'm involved with could show up with their help. Some years ago, I was leading a men's group where the men were lapsing into immature behavior and whining and complaining. And at one point, I told them I was pretty disappointed with what I was hearing. I said, I thought you guys were past all this victim thinking. And I said, the reason I'm most disappointed in you right now is because you're better than this. I've seen it in you. You're fully capable of being better men. And I expect you to be. The Enchanted Leader, as I'm visualizing this figure, leads with aspiration, or inspiration if you want to put it that way. Shows us how things could be and encourages us to imagine how they could be ourselves. Thinking of a speech that was given by President Kennedy, where he inaugurated the whole mission of going to the moon in the U.S. And at one point, during this particularly famous part of the speech, he said, "We choose to go to the moon, not because it's easy, but because it's hard." And because of that speech, a number of people from multiple industries, scientific disciplines, academic disciplines, worked together. And yes, there were political reasons for all this. And there was a shadow side to all this as well. The whole image of conquering space is shadowy. But I think that what also operates in all this, for our purposes, is that it got done because it gave people a vision to belong to. And when people have a vision of how things could be and they belong to that vision, they can do anything. Empires have been built and toppled by people who have a vision of how things could be. Religions founded, elaborated, miraculous artistic and scientific projects that nobody thought was possible, they were, because people dreamed up how they could be possible. It, as an educator, it irritates me when I hear people speculate about how extraterrestrials might have built the pyramids in Egypt. Egyptians built those pyramids. Are you kidding? Let's not underestimate humanity. Creative people can do pretty much anything if they're motivated to do it and if they have leaders who open the way and support their strivings and really get behind them. The leadership that we're used to and that I've often had to practice is about control and management and coordination. We prioritize, we assign tasks, we make the big decisions and all that. But for the Enchanted Leader, what's even more important than all that is to realize that when you tap into the desires of other people, kindred people, they can figure out the details. You don't need to for them. The writer and poet Saint-Exupéry put it pretty well. He talked about how if you want to build a boat, don't hammer nails into planks or teach other people how to do the same. What you need to do instead is, I'm paraphrasing loosely, give some sort of expression to their desire to go to sea, and they'll do the rest. Enchanted leadership recognizes that we have to give up some control and some agency and some of our go-it-alone attitude as leaders, and trust that properly motivated people who have the right skills will go where they need to go. Another way of saying this is that we're telling different stories about leadership here. The figure of the leader stops being the figure of the hero, bursting into situations, having his own way, riding out of town at sunset when the bad guys are all punished. Enchanted leadership is more about collaboration. It's more about getting the town to take care of itself, not depending on a lone gun to do it all. It's about community and relationship building, not just doing heroic things from the back. And as I've said elsewhere, the whole hero model, when it's overused, is it's a disaster. Um, it's responsible for some of the worst of the troubles that we now face as an entire planet right now. People getting into hero psychology, whether or not they think of themselves as heroes, and just doing all kinds of things on their own initiative without worrying about the consequences, which then the rest of us have to be subjected to. Stories, including stories about leadership, are how we guide ourselves through life. They're what we tell ourselves, whether we're doing literal storytelling or, more commonly in terms of this example, the tales that we tell ourselves about who am I, which kinds of leaders can I work with, what should leaders be doing, and all that. So that's what I mean by new stories about leadership. Stories where the leader appears more like a sage, more like a wise figure, more like somebody who comes along and says, I trust you. I trust you to do the right thing, and I will support you as you try to do it. And one thing more about this figure, and I'm going to talk about this at the summit. My presentation is called Restoring Leadership, The View from Laurology. And the wise leader, the enchanted leader, has more than their conscious self as a resource. They also have the unconscious. They also have intuitions and dreams. They have hints. Jungians would call it synchronicities. They have lots of resources to draw on that aren't only about planning and crunching numbers. Intuition in particular gets short shrift in our culture, but think about all the things it's done. Think about those people who didn't get on the Titanic on its maiden voyage because they just didn't feel like everything was right. And they listened to that feeling. In the world of finance, think about the person who, should I invest in this company in particular? And their intuition says, yes, do it. And they do. And it works. Or somebody else who is a long-term investor and, I feel funny about this company now. The numbers look okay. The fundamentals look okay. The stock isn't overvalued, but then they sell, and 2 days later, the stock crashes. So there's mundane examples as well as the kind that historically matter here. So the enchanted leader knows how to consult their intuition, but also knows that it can be wrong. And that's one of many reasons why this style of leadership depends so much on collaboration, on leaning into the intuition and wisdom and creativity of groups of people, all working together under a common vision. Not a vision statement, not a mission statement, but an actual vision and mission that pull them forward into, yes, this is how things could be better. This is what we're dreaming up and fighting for. This is the shape of the angel that needs to be released from the block of stone. Perhaps not an ideal image, but a provocative one nevertheless. A beautiful image that can pull us forward instead of always pushing us from behind. When this kind of leadership works, then a day comes when everybody who's involved with the same visionary project comes together, sees the results, and says some version of, I doubted whether this could be true or not. I doubted whether this was even possible. And many people said that it wasn't. But look at this beautiful thing that we've created together. Thank you.